Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Awakening Beauty Contemplation. As usual, I would like to invite you to grab one of your favorite drinks, tea or coffee, or a glass of water, and join me for a contemplation about the beauty of poetry. Inspiration for this is coming from my share during the Awakening Beauty Circles yesterday. I was the beautifier of the week, bringing something I find beautiful into the space. And I started with poetry. Shared a little bit more about my history with poetry. I'm originally from Turkey and my native culture. Love means a lot. We are a communal culture. Relationships are at the center of our existence. And most of my international friends, they used to always ask me, like, what is this poem about? What is this song about? And my answer was always classic, like, well, 90% of all the poems and songs emerging from the Turkish culture is about love. So given that essence, my introduction with poetry came into my life in earlier stages. I was exposed to poetry because we are such a romantic and emotional culture. It was all around me when I was growing up. But I think the intensity of poetry in my life increased when I was in high school. I had an instructor who was the embodiment of poetry. He was such a beautiful soul, so deep. And he extended so beautiful invitations for us to explore poetry. And he did it in such soulful ways that it ignited some curiosity in me. And I started reading more poetry. And through that reading, I started writing my first poems as well. Such is the gift of talented teachers who have that inner spark in them that they can extend it to their students. Yesterday, during my share, I started my contemplation by sharing a scene from famous movie, Dead Poets Society. In there, the teacher reminded me of mine. He was sharing deep wisdom with his students. He said a deep line. He said, we're not reading poetry or writing poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are a part of human race. So true. Such deep wisdom hidden there. We read and write poetry because we are humans. We are humans with deep emotions, with deep souls. There is so much unseen potential hidden in our inner space. And the traditional ways of language, using language in a directional way, doesn't give justice to that space in us. Poetry is the only way that can point to what we cannot speak about in literal rational terms. Years ago, I read a book about poetry. There, the author defined poetry as the thing that happens when you give your heart a pen. So true. It's the language of the heart. It's the language of the soul. It is the words pouring out of that inner space, from that space of love. It's an overflow of love. And that's what I like about poetry. It's such a universal language because it's beyond the divisions of our minds, beyond the limitations of language. We might not understand a certain language, but when someone reads a poem, even in a foreign language, through its musical resonance, We feel it in our bones. We feel the vibrational resonance of the words. And that is the magic of poetry. Similar to the music, it's universal. And it goes beyond the limitations of our minds. It surpasses mind. It immediately sinks in to the heart space. And that's actually one of the magical gifts of poetry in today's world. We are so much living in our mind space all the time, especially in the Western world. And just by reading poetry, we can take that journey from our mind space to our heart space and just simply be. And that language of that heart space, of that being, of that inner essence is the same anywhere in the world. Such is the power of poetry, such is the power of poets touching us. I think in today's world, we are so used to consuming quick things, quick and easy content. Poetry might look like something short and quick, but its depth, its soulfulness, what it hides behind its shortness is the medicine we need more in today's world. Just because everything related to poetry is so intense, it invites us to take our time. Reading poetry requires a different kind of attitude. It's not like opening a book and just consuming it without any interruptions for 2 hours, 3 hours. We need to take time for letting poetry to sink in. It's like planting a seed. We just have to let it go into the depths of our hearts. And we need to sit with it, to feel. Take its invitation so we can let things emerge out of that experience. So in this way, I think traditional communication is more direct. As a writer, I'm just giving you something. But poetry is like more of a conversation. I extend an invitation for you to co-create with me as the poet. Because there are so much sudden elements in it. There's space for the creativity, for the imagination of the reader. We fill things up so quickly in our modern world. And what I like about poetry is the fact that it can also keep that space for things to emerge. When you look into a poetry book, unlike other traditional books, there is lots of space on a poetry book. When you open the page, most of the page is white space. Then you see some little small writings. It's like the dance of words in that expansive white space. And that to me is the magic and essence of the poetry too. It opens a white space for imagination, through which we can play with the words and take their invitations, but let something emerge in us, connect to that inner beauty in us, and hopefully bring that inner essence out to the world more, create more beauty, embody more beauty out in the world too. As you can tell, I love poetry. One of the ways I try to actualize this love is by gifting poetry books to my loved ones. I gifted many to my friends so far. And sometimes it's quite interesting to observe their interesting gestures. They don't even know what to do with a poetry book. So I feel like I have to also take the responsibility of sharing more about my personal insights about how to read poetry or what are the best ways of getting the most out of a poetic experience. So I would like to take a moment to share a couple tips and tricks if poetry is also something new in your world. Like I briefly said before, although it looks short, poetry is actually very deep. It's a very deep, soulful journey. It's an experience that we travel through. And through the poetry we consume, we plant a seed in us. And through that seed, we embody feelings emerging out of the experience. And we create experiences, memories, sometimes beautiful poetry ourselves too. But for that to happen, we need space and time. So to me, this is like a ritual. Before I get into reading poetry, I prepare myself and my space for it. And the format might change depending on what you like, but in my own world, I like preparing a beautiful tea, finding a cozy place, sometimes having a lovely melodic background music playing in the room, and if it's an evening time, lighting a candle, lighting a gas lamp. And I think these are really so beautiful invitations for us to connect to that inner essence of the poetic soul. Like I like candles so much because unlike direct lamps, which reveals everything like direct communication, lamps reveal a sweet balance of light and dark. And through that subtle movement and through that subtle light coming out of the darkness, it opens more space for the magic of poetry. I think it aligns a lot better with the soul of poetry that can reveal unseen darker aspects through the light we bring into the space. But there is also this reverence in that act. Like we need to be respectful for the sacredness of that inner space. And I think a slight lighting might be a nice way to find that sweet balance of approaching with the right level of reverence, aligning with the soul of poetry, which signals the unseen, but does not reveal it all, like we do in the common language. Then I let my intuition to guide my journey. I usually sit with the book and randomly open one page and read the poetry aloud, using my voice, creating music with my voice. And in a way, me using my voice is a healing experience personally for me too. When I listen to the melody of the poetry, it helps me to embody that vibration. And after reading, I take some time. I just let it sink in. Then I contemplate. What are my thoughts? What are my emotions? How am I feeling in my body right now? And after enough time with that particular poem, I might go to another one. Just open another random one. And see, it skips. Sometimes explore whether there are correlations between them. And I can repeat this a handful of times. In my usual style, I usually go for 3. It's a beautiful number. You know that I like triples. It's a good number to give some diversity, but it's also a good number that limits the experience enough that we are not overwhelming ourselves. And that's how I usually read poetry. I can just finish my tea, 15 minutes, half an hour with a nice music in the background, creating a sacred space that can align with the soul of the poetry, and let it speak through me. Let it reveal the inner essence, the inner beauty. And my personal trick is to use this as a beautifier of the day early in the morning when I feel like I'm not in the vibration of creation immediately and I need some fuel for my soul. I sometimes trick myself by reading poetry in the morning that can help me to connect to that inner essence so I can reveal more of that during the day. As you can tell, I am a lover of poetry. I am a reader of poetry, and I'm a writer of poetry too. And my intention in this space is to share more of the beautiful things in my life, and poetry is definitely one of them. And I will be creating a playlist named Poetry, and in there, I intend to share some of my favorite poems, introduce you to some of the favorite poets in my life. And who knows, maybe share some of the ones that I have written myself. But till that time, I would like to invite you to have the intention to explore more of the beauty of poetry in your own life too. For example, when you go to a bookstore, in addition to exploring regular books, why not to visit the poetry section too? Why not to just open a page and see what that particular poem will reveal to you? Well, as always, thank you for being here. Thank you for giving your intention and attention to the space in which we awaken beauty and create more of it externally out in the world. Till next time, remember your beauty.